An infestation is spreading across America. A deadly insect, just arrived from China, is killing trees nationwide. Recently, an outbreak was discovered here in Missouri, near Lake Walker. I'm talking about the emerald ash borer. The emerald ash borer is changing how the lumber businesses function in our area. Basically, lumber transporters, due to the laws put in place, have to transport wood around any areas that are infected by the emerald ash borer. There are quarantines in place to try and prevent the spread. And because of that, recycling businesses that are trying to keep the wood local and recycle it have sprung up to try and fill some of that need. The emerald ash borer will, unless stopped, also eliminate multiple species of local ash trees and species that potentially could not exist anywhere else. The rest of the ecology will have to adapt to that change. And then finally, the emerald ash borer has caused a firewood shortage in many areas, and the emerald ash borer trees that are, the ash trees that are often affected are trees that are in local areas and urban areas such as cities, parks, lining the streets, and those are the greatest areas that are all dying together because the ash borer infection runs right down them. I've worked with the United States Forestry Department to develop this speech and research these emerald ash borers. I'm going to explain the emerald ash borer outbreak, how it started, and what kind of damage it causes, how it is affecting us in Missouri, and what you can do to protect yourself. First, let's start at the beginning. In the article, First Case of Emerald Ash Borer Found in Minnesota, it states that Chris Nazelli discovered the first emerald ash borer outbreak in Minnesota in 2002 while pruning trees in St. Paul, Minnesota. One of the trees he found had likely already been infected for as much as 3 years. This paper was published May 14, 2009. They rapidly quarantined the area, but it was too late to stop the full spread. We believe that this outbreak came to us from China because the importation laws were not sufficient to check the wood that was being imported. So basically, what is the emerald ash borer and why does it kill these trees? Well, the adults eat leaves and generally do not cause very much damage. But they lay their eggs underneath the bark of the trees. And then the larvae, once they hatch, will burrow through the tree, eating in this layer just below the bark. This is what the tree uses to transport its nutrients, and the pattern that you can see here is of an affected tree. The tree can no longer transport nutrients because it has been completely ringed by these larvae burrowing through. According to Executive Order 13,112 from the President, published February 3, 1999, it defines invasive species. Invasive species means that an alien species whose introduction does or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. Under this definition, the emerald ash borer is considered an invasive species by the government. In the future, we must be careful of our importation laws and hopefully discover this type of outbreak sooner so that we can control the situation better. The quarantine did not hold forever, and that brings us to the second stage of the outbreak. The outbreak was massively spreading in Minnesota, and the city of Minneapolis was affected most heavily. As of October 2010, Minneapolis, Minnesota anticipates spending $26 million to remove and replace ash trees on public property, not including the parks and natural areas. This was revealed by an article from the Star Tribune in Minnesota. As you can see on this map, Michigan is where the initial outbreak occurred, and the red areas show the infections. The outbreaks have spread across multiple states, but is still most heavily concentrated in Michigan, where it has done the most of its damage. Some of these areas that were also heavily affected nationwide were the states such as Indiana and Ohio. The simulations predict that an expanding emerald ash borer infestation will likely encompass most of 25 states and warrant treatment, removal, and replacement of more than 17 million ash trees with mean discounted costs of $10.7 billion, according to Kevin Kovacs, Robert Haidt, et al. In their article for the Ecological Economics, published January 15, 2010. This is a nationwide cost estimate based on the outbreak growth and only projected for the next few years. The widespread ecological impacts include the quarantining of large areas affected and the lumber industries having to deal with these quarantines. In addition, I interviewed Megan York, who is the wildlife biologist for the Mark Twain National Forest, working with the United States Forestry Department. And in the interview, she emphasized that the logging industry is the most heavily affected. Because of the quarantines, it has impacted our firewood cutters. Wood must be hauled around these quarantine counties instead of through them, costing the companies a great deal of money. The impacts from this infestation will be felt for generations to come. Now, all of this may seem very far away and distant from us, but the emerald ash borers are now spreading to our area. As you can see on this map, there is an infestation in Missouri, very near us, very near Butler County where we are. This infestation was in fact right by Lake Wapapello. The Corps of Engineers discovered this infestation merely a few weeks ago. After discovering it, they quickly quarantined the area. I also talked to Megan York Harris about how they deal with such an infestation after it was discovered. She explained that all you can do once there is an outbreak is be proactive. You must cut the ash, pile the trees, and burn all of it. However, even though the Corps of Engineers tried this and burned all of the trees that were affected, some of the emerald ash borers still survived and continued to spread across the region. It was recently discovered that this outbreak has spread outside of the Corps of Engineers' land and is now affecting land controlled by the United States Forestry Department. When you are camping, the United States Forestry Department officially recommends that you do not transport lumber between the counties. This will help them enforce their quarantines and prevent the spread of the emerald ash borers. The Missouri Emerald Ash Borer Action Plan analyzed the local tree populations of Missouri on May 2nd, 2008. The Missouri Department of Conservation, Missouri Department of Agriculture, and other departments determined that here in Missouri, approximately 14% of our city's trees are ashes, and as much as 21% of the trees in our city parks are ash trees. This, as the infestation spreads, can affect our local areas and cost our cities a great deal of money in these hard economic times. We must plan ahead because the lumber will become more expensive and the cities are going to have to be ready to deal with the problems as they arise. In conclusion, I have now shown you how the infestation started and why it is important to be responsible when importing things from other countries. I've also shown you the massive outbreaks in Minnesota and how they affected those areas and why the quarantines are not always effective. Then, I revealed the local effects of this emerald ash borer outbreak. And now, you are better educated on the emerald ash borer and its effects on you, the community, the economy, and the environment. Remember that in cases like these, there are no perfect solutions. I thank you for your time.